Foggy Dew. This is Colin. Well, gang, I hope you all had a wonderful weekend at home with your families. So I've got a bunch of quick. I'm looking looking at this like mountain of notes I have in front of me. So I'm going to go through a bunch of quick hits, and then I have kind of a cool story at the end of the episode for you today. But I guess I'll start off the week on kind of a fun note. I have been following the Artemis program and the Artemis launch very, very closely. And it's just so wild to me. Like, mankind is going back to the moon. And I guess thinking, we're not going back to the moon, we're actually going past the moon. I guess technically that would be correct. Artemis is going to take mankind further than we've ever been before. That space shuttle, Artemis, is going to go 5,300 miles beyond the moon. It's going to go 5,300 miles beyond the moon and then circle back around. But I guess just looking at this, we haven't done anything like this since 1972. So it's been 50 plus years since man has traveled to the moon. But I guess when I look at this whole thing, like, I just remember as a child of the 80s watching NASA, seeing these massive rockets go up with an American flag on it. It just captured such a feeling of national pride for me. And I guess that's where I come out on this whole thing. I really wish it was being covered better in the news. You barely even hear about it with all the madness going on in the world and like domestic crazy issues. I mean, I hope that schools and parents are showing their kids this. I just want children to see this amazing thing. I hope it captures the minds of young people. I hope it shows them the potential of humanity. I just think going to the moon and lifting off in this way and taking mankind forward. America is such an amazing place. We're reaching our hand out into the void. I just really, really hope the children are watching this. I'm so excited about the whole thing. So weather delays, I think it pushed this whole thing back. They are fueling the rockets today, February 2nd. And then my understanding is they're going to launch on the 8th. So literally we're going back to the moon in like 6 days. So just an amazing thing. I'm so excited about it, and I'll be talking about it more on the show. So just look forward to that. So another quick hit, I had noticed a date over the weekend that kind of jumped off the page to me. Now, I'm sure most people don't pay attention to this stuff, but on January 31st, 1968, the battle for Hue City began in Vietnam. Now, the battle for Hue City always fascinated me as a child. And the thing you got to realize about the battle for Hue is that that battle began as part of the Tet Offensive. Now, the Tet Offensive was named after the Vietnamese New Year, but in the Tet Offensive, 77,000 NVA soldiers attacked about 100 cities and towns simultaneously. Now, there were two huge battles that came out of the Tet Offensive. One was at Khe Sanh, and then the second one was at Hue City. That Tet Offensive was the largest offensive by either side in the Vietnam War. Now, Hue was a very, very strategic point for U.S. forces. It was very important for supply chains. Like, it was right near the DMZ, so it was very important, like, logistically for the U.S. Army. But on January 3rd, 1968, Hue City was totally overrun by the NVA. So these guys captured the town. Well, after they captured the town, what happened is that the Marine Corps and the Army's 1st Division had to go in there and clean them out. So the Marines and the Army's 1st Division literally walk into like an urban nightmare. You got to realize that when the NVA, like, they ran and captured Hue City, they are now totally entrenched in Hue City. So they've got concrete buildings protecting them. So they had snipers, they had machine gun nests, they had mortars, they had all of it. They were totally dug in Hue City. And the problem that the American forces had was that the military brass kept underestimating this whole situation. First of all, they thought that the NVA were not going to stay there. They thought after the NVA had captured the city that they would leave. Well, the other problem that they ran into is they kept underestimating how many NVA were actually in Hue City. But the Battle of Hue City, like, if you back up and look at it, that was true urban combat. House to house fighting, street to street fighting. It wasn't like a Napoleonic conflict where you had armies lined up against each other. And the only thing I can think of, like, that's close in military history to the Battle of Hue City would be like the battle for Fallujah. I think that's the closest thing. And I guess when I was a kid, I had read something where there was a Marine casualty for every 5 yards gained. Now, I don't know whether or not that's true, but it was a pretty big butcher's bill when you look at that battle. So the U.S. Army fought with ARVN, and ARVN is ARVN. That's the South Vietnamese military. Between the US and ARVN forces, you had 675 KIA and you had about 2,300 wounded. So just a massive, like tons of carnage coming out of that. But the NVA statistics were even worse. So the NVA had 2,400 killed and 3,000 wounded. But it's interesting when you look at Hue City, like the urban combat part of that, like always blew my mind. But the battle for Hue City had bigger implications nationally in the US domestically. Now it's interesting because Walter Cronkite was like the voice of America. Well, Walter Cronkite had actually traveled to Hue City to report on the battle. And Cronkite, when he got to Hue City, basically reported to the American people like the Vietnam War is unwinnable. He didn't say it was unwinnable, but what he said is that it would basically be a stalemate. So Cronkite's assertion was basically like, even if we send more troops in here, we're never going to get these guys out of here. It's going to be a complete stalemate. We cannot win. Well, after Cronkite gave that report, Lyndon Johnson, who was the president at the time, saw that. And supposedly Lyndon Johnson had turned to somebody and said, quote, if I lost Cronkite, I've lost middle America. That's how big Walter Cronkite was back then. And I guess broadly, if you look at it, like militarily speaking, the US won that battle. But Hue City marked just this massive turning point of public opinion about the Vietnam War. You got to realize that the draft had started in 1967. The draft was televised. So the draft of the Vietnam War was like, I mean, it was like immediate revulsion by American families about a draft for Vietnam. So, and I think talking about like watching things on TV, like the medium of TV was so new. And I think media and the TV, being able to see it like in your living room, I think it just fueled negative opinion about the war more broadly. Like it's the first time ever that like war is being broadcast like in your living room. You could watch war live. And there was this huge visual that I always took away from Hue City. And there was an ARVN officer, so a South Vietnamese officer that was caught by the media doing something that like became famous. And it was this South Vietnamese general, and this guy's name was General Luan. Well, General Luan in the Battle of Hue City had summarily executed an NVA prisoner in front of reporters. So this guy literally, I think he had a 38 snub nose, but he literally pulled out a pistol in front of reporters and shot a guy in the head in the middle of the street, summarily executed him. Well, so they took video of it, but then the photograph of it became known as the Saigon execution. And that photo of General Luan summarily executing a guy won a Pulitzer. And I guess just all this stuff combined, like, just led to this souring of public opinion on the Vietnam War. I mean, you had a draft televised, you had all these visuals coming across, you have all these horrible photos coming out. It just was too much domestically for most people after Hue City happened. But I guess if you look at like the soldiers that fought on the ground, like these are the best among us. Our warriors that went in and cleaned out the NVA in places like Hue City and Khe Sanh. What a just horrific thing. But thank God for these men that went and did that. How brave these people are is just beyond understanding. To go house to house, street to street. We should just be so thankful for our military veterans. But anyway, I saw that date and it made me think about it. Just Hue City, for whatever reason, captured my mind as a young person. And here I am on a podcast. I just want to make sure I'm remembering this stuff. So anyway, I had another quick hit for you. So I have been watching Virginia like a hawk. The news that is coming out of Virginia is just wild. And when I tell you I'm going to follow a story, the Foggy Dew digs into stories. Now, I had talked about Virginia passing all these new laws. They passed new tax laws. They passed election laws. They passed gun laws. Well, they also passed energy laws. So the blue trifecta, the new government in Virginia, passed energy laws targeting electricity specifically. Well, now we're getting some math coming out of that with these new laws on electricity. So Virginia citizens now have a 200% increase in their electricity bills. 200%. Okay, Dominion Energy is the electrical provider in Virginia. So when you used to get a Dominion Energy bill, these are the numbers that came out on this. So bills that were $200 are now going to be $621 a month. You are going from $200 a month to $621 a month. I'm not a math wizard, but that is a spicy meatball to eat. And I guess the news gets even worse because Abigail Spanberger, the new governor, has even more plans for Virginia taxpayers' pocketbooks. What Spanberger did, one of the first things she did, she actually re entered a green energy initiative. So the green energy initiative that she signed back up on is called, quote, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Well, what does that even mean? What that does is it's going to add an additional fee onto energy. So folks in Virginia now will get a $1,100 yearly bill based on this. And what they'll do is they'll prorate it. So the scenario that you're talking about now, you're going from $200 a month for your electrical. The new bill is going to be $621 for the electrical proper, plus an extra $90 for green energy initiatives. So the bill now for a Virginia taxpayer is going to be $710 a month for electrical. That is a $510 increase per month. $510 increase per month. And the only thing I can tell you is even if you had a Republican come in tomorrow, or you had a change in administration or governance, the path that they're on now is going to be permanent energy inflation in Virginia. It's permanent. The energy company is never going to go down at this point. And I'm sorry, I just have to laugh. It's not funny at all if you're a Virginia taxpayer and a citizen, but Abigail Spanberger ran as a moderate. She ran as a moderate Democrat. She ran on affordability, which is like the Democrats' nationally stated position, like affordability. There is nothing affordable about getting an extra $500 a month tacked on for your electrical bill. $500 a month is a new car payment. And I guess if you go even beyond that, like beyond a private citizen, like imagine a business. Imagine being a business owner and watching a 200% increase on your electric. And I guess, I don't know if Abigail Spanberger or anybody in the legislature understands this, but where are businesses going? To AI. Newsflash, AI needs electric. So if you look at it that way, with like the growth model of businesses being AI, the cost model then for the business owner is geometric. The whole situation is totally unfortunate. I feel really bad for people in Virginia that are like normal people that are just going to get walloped by this insanity. It is a bad business model that they've moved to. It is financially illiterate. And the only thing I can tell you, just as an objective observer, Virginia is going to be exhibit A nationally of bad governance. There is no way to hide from. And again, the problem with it is so abrupt. You're going from literally like a purple state to like left of California overnight. But you're going to see a mass exodus out of Virginia. And again, remember, Virginia was not even figured into the electoral map in 2030. It's going to be wild to watch that unfold. So, another quick hit. I spoke a few weeks ago about UN funding. I have to laugh at this because I had talked about how Trump had quietly pulled funding from 33 UN committees. This was a year-long plan that he had tasked Marco Rubio with. And it's like the stimulus response of an amoeba. The minute that Trump started pulling funding, you had all these big government people in the media, the politician, like the big government politicians on the right and the left, they start crying about the rules-based order, like precedent or allies and all this other stuff. Well, I wanted to follow up on that story because Donald Trump cut the funding on January 8th. So literally like just a few weeks ago. Well, he cut the funding on January 8th. Well, on January 30th, the UN sent a letter out to 139 member states. Are you curious as to the contents of that letter? The UN is now warning all participant countries that it is, quote, they're standing on the precipice of, quote, imminent financial collapse. Awesome. So it's kind of funny when daddy pulls the credit card, how things collapse on itself. I read this story. I'm like, so in 3 weeks, the UN collapsed. They're on the verge of financial annihilation. But the globalists appear to have lost their ATM card in the United States. And the only thing I can tell you about the UN was a globalist shell company. All the UN did was dilute US national sovereignty. The UN over the last like 30 years just devolved into like this den of socialism and moral lecturing. So it took 3 weeks for that to happen. Well, I got even worse news for the globalists. Because if you remember, like a week or two ago, I talked about how we're now pulling out of the WHO. That's the World Health Organization. Well, I'm happy to report that the WHO is having some huge problems also. Now, the WHO is a little bit different than the UN. They are run by a guy named Tedros. He's a physician. Well, Tedros running the WHO is in a complete panic. So here was Tedros the other day giving a speech. Tedros, quote, "We did not impose lockdowns or masks or vaccine mandates. We don't have that power," end quote. Okay, I don't know what Tedros is smoking, but I would love to get a part of that. So, but Tedros is rewriting history. Every ridiculous COVID mandate came out of the World Health Organization. Every big government person, right and left in the United States, was parroting things that were coming out of the World Health Organization says XYZ, so we better do it. All of the insanity came out of the WHO, paired with the CDC, paired with the FDA. And Tedros can sit there and rewrite history all he wants, but sitting here now saying that wasn't, we just didn't know, all this other stuff, it just proves the whole point. The WHO is a globalist scam that just got completely exposed. And guess what happened to the WHO? Daddy pulled their credit card too. The WHO is basically the exact same thing as the UN, except that they're in white lab coats. And all I can tell you is the WHO, I bet within a week or two, the WHO collapses. This is just another huge win for US sovereignty. And I had to laugh thinking about this whole situation. If you'll remember talking about the WHO, the minute that Donald Trump and the US pulled out of that, Gavin Newsom in California is like, oh, we're going to join the WHO. And I was looking at and thinking about this, like, that's the exact same thing with like a Mark Carney making a deal with China and not understanding the chessboard. Here's Gavin Newsom going the exact opposite way of common sense and logic. And this guy wants to be the president. So the WHO is going to collapse on its face. But so let's just look at it this way. The US pulls out. We know what's going to happen. The WHO is going to go bankrupt. They're going to face imminent financial collapse as well. Well, there's Gavin Newsom not understanding the situation and doubling down on silly. But you can rest assured, I will bet any amount of money within the next few weeks, I will be talking about the WHO going bankrupt. But anyway, the UN is on the verge of, quote, imminent financial collapse. I just wanted to pass that along. It took 3 weeks. So another quick hit. A couple weeks ago, I discussed a Supreme Court case that I wanted to follow up on. The case that I discussed was basically looking at the legality of trans people in sports. Meaning the argument was that trans people were being discriminated against. They wanted biological boys playing in girls' sports. That elevated to the Supreme Court. Now, I had talked initially about that case thinking that it's going to be 9-0 or 8-1, like the logical path. The case that was being presented did not make any logical sense. And I had mentioned on that show that I thought that Supreme Court case would be the high watermark for the trans insanity that we've witnessed over the last 10 years or so. Well, I wanted to pass this story along because I thought it was a good enjoinder that the legal woes keep piling up here for the trans community. A new legal precedent hit late last week. Now, what was this legal precedent? So there was a case that was, I'll just talk about. So this case involved a person who was detransitioning. So you had a biological girl who wanted to become a boy. This person's name was Fox Varian. Fox Varian was detransitioning. Well, Fox Varian sued her psychologist and her plastic surgeon. The psychologist and the plastic surgeon had recommended a double mastectomy at the age of 16 for this kid. So 2 doctors recommended that a minor get a double mastectomy. They recommended that a 16-year-old child got pumped full of meds. Well, I'm glad to report that Fox Varian won her lawsuit. The 2 doctors were found guilty. These 2 doctors were found guilty of medical malpractice. That is setting a very important precedent here. Fox Varian won $2 million in that judgment. But I guess the broader implications here are enormous. There are going to be thousands of court cases exactly like this very, very soon. And if you're asking me, Colin, sitting here today looking at this, I'm sorry, but doctors that were recommending to minors to surgically alter their body in this way are evil. They recommended child mutilation. That's exactly what these people did. You are taking a minor with gender dysphoria and you are exploiting it into a brand new science. But anybody that pushed this insanity from the medical community better be looking out. And that includes medical schools, school counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, surgeons. All of those entities in medical are going to be liable for this. If you look at the depression and suicide rates for kids that have transitioned, it's obscene. And look, if I back away and be fair about this argument, I'm sorry, this argument makes me just nuts. If you are 21 years old and you want to transition, that is totally your business. I have no issue with it. None. You're an adult, you're old enough to make your own decisions. But a minor, a 16-year-old, that should not happen. A 16-year-old with gender dysphoria, like talk through the problem, work through the problem. Surgically altering your body for the rest of your life and making permanent decisions like that is just not something a child should be put through. It's like a tattoo, and think of it that way. It's a permanent change. And I'm sorry, but the parents, I think, have been very abused in this situation as well. Meaning, you have well intentioned parents that care about their children and they go into these doctors, and you want to trust your doctor. You want to trust that the doctor is giving you good medical advice. But these doctors are then recommending to these well natured parents to mutilate their child. And I guess, again, this is going to set a huge legal precedent. I'm very happy for Fox Variant. I'm very happy for her family. And I keep thinking about the trans argument. I said that the Supreme Court case was the high watermark of that movement. It was. And I think you're going to see a complete receding of this entire deal moving forward. And I really just wonder, like in 50 years, when people look back on this whole trans movement and all the stuff that happened with it, what's going to be written about it? And I just have to think that the postmortem is not going to be very good, but I'll be watching it. So, another quick hit. I'm happy to report that the Donroe Doctrine is in full swing. So, a couple big things happened with the Donroe Doctrine the last few days. And I guess the best place to start is the Panama Canal. Now, if you remember, ever since Trump was inaugurated, he's been talking about the Panama Canal. And if you know anything about the Panama Canal over the last few years, China has been very, very heavily invested in the Panama Canal. China needed the Panama Canal to play their games in this hemisphere. Having Chinese access to that shipping artery is critical to their operations in our hemisphere. Well, Trump had repeatedly asserted ever since he got into office that canal, the Panama Canal, is the U.S.'s property, that the U.S. built it, and we did. Well, how was China controlling the Panama Canal? Well, China had a Hong Kong company that they were using basically as a shell company to help manage what happened in the Panama Canal. Well, on Friday, Panama Supreme Court ruled that Hong Kong company's contracts were unconstitutional, i.e., China was not allowed back in. Well, with that ruling now, knocking that Hong Kong company out, China has exactly zero influence over the Panama Canal. And who has all the logistics now? The USA. So again, talking about BRICS being dismantled in our hemisphere, there you go. The Panama Canal was a huge strategic piece for China. Well, this whole thing, I talked about BRICS. This is going to get even worse for BRICS in this hemisphere because now Trump is targeting Cuba. Donald Trump declared a national emergency on Cuba. His emergency order listed the bad actors that were influencing Cuba. It's all the BRICS countries: China, Russia, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah. So this emergency order is super important. What it says is that any nation providing oil to Cuba will be hit with massive tariffs. So what happens there? That makes Cuba dependent on US oil. Well, let's just step back and look at this. Panama Canal cancels Chinese contracts. Cuba's energy supply now targeted. The Donroe Doctrine is in full effect here, guys. Controlling energy will break Cuba in half. China is totally disrupted now. Donald Trump is using tariffs to successfully control this hemisphere. And I guess Cuba, if you look at it this way, I talked about it on the show. Cuba is not the point here. The whole point is disrupting BRICS. BRICS has been soft attacking this hemisphere for decades. They attacked weak points in our hemisphere. And now, the way Trump has everything set up, we can suffocate Cuba. We don't need to do a Bay of Pigs deal. And I talked about that on a show before. We don't need to invade Cuba and black bag anybody. All we have to do is just do an energy embargo and we'll force compliance. China has no way to get oil to these guys. Russia has no way to get oil to these guys. All of those logistics are now totally disrupted. The US reigns supreme. And I guess, look, go even further. The Panama Canal is more of the same. We're not going to allow Russia and Chinese vessels to carry in contraband into Cuba. And I guess if you step back and look at the big chessboard even more broadly, both of those things give us way more leverage globally. I talked about China on the show last week. China is having massive internal issues. They've got population decline. They've got their credit freezing up. They've got home buying drying up. They have no oil reserves. And look at it even further. So China has all these internal issues. They've lost this hemisphere. They're going to lose that whole Canada deal. Donald Trump is not going to allow that Canada-China deal to move forward. Absolutely not. He'll tariff them out. And then I guess look at the rest of the BRICS actors. Look at Iran. Iran has its population revolting. The mullahs and the Ayatollah are on the ropes. The U.S. is surrounding with warships. I mean, you have people that are actively calling for him to go in and help out the insurgents. But if you look at Iran specific, Iran is being isolated. So we are able to project power into Iran. Iran doesn't have the logistics like a China does. They don't have the logistics like a Russia does. And I guess talking about Russia, Russia's affected with this as well. If you cut Russia out of this hemisphere and they lose Cuba, Russia is being isolated in like their sphere of influence, like the geography that surrounds them. But these are just, man, what Donald Trump is doing, the moves that he is making internationally, the chessboard has been so well played out by Donald Trump and his administration. It's almost insane. And I think broadly, when you look at his administration, like 50 years from now, that's going to be his signature achievement. He talks about it all the time, peace through strength. And I think that's exactly what he's doing. But getting our house in order in this hemisphere was so vital. But now you have the Panama Canal in line. You have Cuba falling in line. Good things are happening globally, guys. It's awesome to watch. So another quick hit. I talk on the show a lot about money. Always follow the money in politics. And I've talked several times about cash flow issues for the DNC. Well, new numbers just dropped about the DNC the other day. So there was a report that came out talking about cash on hand at the start of 2025. So I'm just going to go through these numbers because it's not super complicated. So this is the RNC cash on hand at the start of 2025. The RNC had 38 million, zero debt at the start of 2025. 38 million. So the DNC at the start of 2025 had 22 million on hand, zero debt. Well, here's the new numbers. So by the end of 2025, cash on hand, the RNC had 95 million with zero debt. The DNC, they had 12 million on hand, but 16 million in debt. I'm sorry, the DNC is 4 million in the hole. Now, what I would tell you is the DNC is not the end all be all, but these are markers. These are indicators, right? The Democrat Party uses NGOs like Act Blue and others to fund their operations for elections. But if you look at negative 4 million for the DNC, that's bad. What that is a debt spiral for a party. And I just keep looking at it like there's all these markers that are coming out. There are major headwinds for the Democrat Party nationally. And they've got issues well beyond money. Let me just start with a couple. I jotted a couple of these down. Number one, they've got the Voting Rights Act that's coming soon. If you'll remember, the Supreme Court looked at a case about the Voting Rights Act being constitutional or not. That looks at Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act that basically looks at gerrymandered districts for African Americans. I am almost positive that's going to go 5-4 or 6-3, where the Voting Rights Act, Section 4, is declared unconstitutional. If that occurs, the Democrat Party is going to lose 18 to 20 seats nationally. Those districts are not going to exist anymore. They would be rolled into other districts that are surrounding them. So you would lose 18 to 20 seats with that decision. And that decision probably will be coming in the next 30 days. The other issue that the Democrat Party is running into is this voter ID thing. I am pretty sure that this SAVE Act, or whatever they're calling it now, is going to advance. 84% of Americans want voter ID. 84%. It is very hard to get that type of consensus above like 60%. That is an issue that all Americans want. And it's so obvious. If I'm an American, you should show ID to vote. This idea that it's racist or somehow it hurts democracy, you need an ID for everything. And you can go get an ID anywhere. The assumption that people have no access to IDs is ridiculous. If you can't get an ID, then why are you voting? I mean, that's such an obvious question. But you very rarely get that kind of broad bipartisan support for an issue, 84%. I'm fairly confident we're going to get some type of voter ID legislation passed relatively soon. So I talked about it just a minute ago with this is the third issue. You've got electoral math issues. And I've talked about this on the show before. Blue states are losing voters in droves. People are fleeing places like California, Illinois, New York. I just talked about Virginia. If you're living in the state of Virginia and you're getting hit with a new $500 tax bill or like electricity bill because the government decided to come in day one, talk about affordability, and then does a bait and switch on you, you're going to leave. So Virginia's going to be losing population as well. Well, that electoral math issue is going to manifest itself in 2030. That's going to be a negative 21 just based on the numbers today. Negative 21 in the Electoral College. That's a huge problem for them too. Well, there's other bad news for the Democrat Party. Missouri, the state of Missouri, filed a new lawsuit last week. What that lawsuit is saying is that illegals should not be counted in the census. And since it's a state, the state of Missouri, that lawsuit is going to move very, very quickly to the Supreme Court. It deals specifically with the Constitution of the states, so that's going to get fast-tracked. And I can tell you that that issue, if that goes through, if it is found that illegals do not count for the census, that's Section 2 of the 14th Amendment. If that is found that illegals should not be counted in the census, the electoral math is going to get a lot worse than 21. That is going to be a death blow for the Electoral College for blue. And it's interesting looking at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is actually going to be looking at another major issue soon. And I guess just keep this on your radar screen. Birthright citizenship is going to be reviewed April 1st. Now, they wouldn't rule on it for probably another like 4 months or something like that, but that is an issue that is really needs to get litigated. And if I look at like the birthright citizenship issue, that could go either way. But my suspicion is the way things are going, that will be found illegal. 6-3 or 5-4. And again, just as a normal person in mid-America, like I don't understand how you could have two people that are not citizens. The lady comes in 9 months pregnant, first day as a baby, and the kid's an American citizen. I don't really think that was the intent of the founders, but we'll see how it goes in the court. So I guess just looking at all these disparate issues, and I'm trying to, again, put the puzzle pieces together, that just seems like a perfect storm against blue to me. And I guess when I look at that and see all these issues, the Democrat leadership, the power brokers in the Democrat Party, the media, these people all know this stuff. They know these issues are out there. So if these guys know this, then I hate to say this, but it almost makes Minnesota look even more cynical. Like it's almost like throwing a match behind you. Like you're not able to compete in a logical, rational argument. Like the debate's over. So now it's like an emotional bloodletting. I think there's just a lot of emotional damage that's being caused right now. And it's really unfortunate. Honestly, I hate it just as a human being. But the only thing I can tell anybody, right or left, there are brighter days ahead for all of us. I think we're going to be just fine. We have to get through some tough times here, but we're going to be fine. So anyway, as this stuff comes up, I want to report it though. So, okay, I told you I had one more story, like cool story for you. And I've been sitting on this one for a while, and I owe you guys a Korea story. But I've been sitting on this and I just wanted to talk about it. So I had told a couple Medal of Honor stories, I guess on Friday with Vietnam, but I've got a great Medal of Honor story about a guy named Daniel Daly, which is a name you probably never heard of before. But Daniel Daly was a guy that was born in New York in 1873. Now, Daly was a short guy. He was only 5'6". He fought as an amateur boxer in New York. So this was a tough guy. So Daniel Daly enlisted as a Marine in 1899. So he enlisted in 1899, and in 1900, he saw his first action. That first action was in the Boxer Rebellion. And I guess I probably explain that. Most people don't even know what the Boxer Rebellion was. Basically, what the Boxer Rebellion was an armed insurrection in China. So you had nativist Chinese, which were called boxers. That's the fighting stance. So these boxers had actually stormed the capital in Beijing. They wanted to overthrow the government. Well, the boxers started attacking the capital, and 8 different countries came in. They sent their militaries basically to support China and put down the boxers in the Boxer Rebellion. Well, Daly was part of the Marine force that was sent in by the US to put down the Boxer Rebellion. Well, so the Marines were assigned a duty to like guard the walls around Beijing. So the boxers are assaulting Beijing. Again, they're trying to overthrow the government. So Daly is put on a wall. And as he's on the wall, the guys that he was with, they were all killed or they were forced to retreat. So Daly ended up staying alone on this section of a wall. He alone held the wall throughout the night. He was the only guy on the wall, and he ended up fighting off like hundreds of boxers. So this guy single-handedly, through the entire course of an evening, fought off an assault on the wall. Well, he repulsed the boxers himself, and in 1901, he was awarded a Medal of Honor for his actions in the Boxer Rebellion. Now, Daly then ended up fighting in every Marine action for the next 14 years. This guy was a total badass. Well, by 1915, he was a gunnery sergeant. And Gunnery Sergeant Daly was sent to Haiti. Now, Haiti kind of had the same thing as the Boxer Rebellion. Haiti was being attacked by Caicos rebels. These Caicos rebels were trying to overthrow the government. So the Marines were sent in to fight the Caicos back and preserve the Haitian government. So while he's in Haiti, Daly sees even more action. He was involved in a thing called the Battle of Fort Dipity. Now, at that Battle of Fort Dipity, the Marines that he was with were ambushed. So you have 40 Marines ambushed by 400 Caicos. Well, as they're getting ambushed, they had to drop their heavy weaponry. They have to drop their heavy weaponry, and they're forced to retreat. They're just being overwhelmed by these Caicos rebels. Well, without that heavy weaponry, those Marines are now vulnerable. The Caicos are raking them. So these guys are pinned down. So they're pinned down, the Caicos are attacking them, and night falls. Well, Daly's like, this is untenable. I have to fix this. So he leaves his position alone. So Daly works his way back to those heavy weapons. This guy carried 2 machine guns and all the ammunition back to the Marines. Well, with those guns and ammo, the Marines were able to rout the Caicos rebels. So for that second action in Haiti, Daly won his second Medal of Honor in 1915. Daniel Daly now in 1915 has 2 Medals of Honor. 2 Medals of Honor for 2 separate acts. Now, you might be interested in this. There are only 19 men ever who won 2 Medals of Honor. And there were only 2 Marines that ever did it. So Daly was one of 2 Marines to ever accomplish that feat. That alone, just the 2 Medals of Honor, makes Daly an absolute Marine legend and a military legend, let's just be honest. But this guy wasn't finished. Remember the timeline here. 1915, what was occurring? World War I. So Daly is still in the Marines, and he was sent to France in 1917. Well, by 1918 in France, Daly is at another major battle in World War I. He was at the Battle of Belleau Wood. Now, the Battle of Belleau Wood was a huge battle, but in that battle, the Marines were pinned down. You had 1,200 Germans with 200 machine guns that are raking the Marines. These guys are like in a trench. So these guys are just smoking the Marines. Well, Daly's no stranger to gunfire. He's been there before. He calmly coordinated the Marine defense. Well, after 4 days of intense fire where the Marines are pinned down, a German gun decided to advance on the Marines. So this German gun team starts advancing on the Marine position. What does Daly do? Daly gets up alone and charges the gun team. Daly throws 3 grenades at them and shoots their commander with a 45. He ended up stopping the advance completely by himself. Now, the weird thing about that is he did not win a 3rd Medal of Honor, even though it sounds like he should have, right? So for that action at Bellewood, he won a Navy Cross and he won a Distinguished Service Cross. This is where Daly became a true legend. So in that Battle of Bellewood, when he got up out of the trench and attacked the Germans, he apparently yelled something. Well, as the Germans advanced on the Marines at Bellewood, Daly allegedly yelled, quote, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" End quote. So this American badass decides to charge a German gun crew and yells, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" And then he starts chucking grenades. Well, I don't know much, but you're a legend at that point. Daly went down in Marine Corps history with that act. That quote from Daly is on the facade of the National Museum of the Marine Corps. Daly is one of the most highly decorated Marines ever. He's got 2 Medals of Honor. He was called the fightingest Marine. He was called the most outstanding Marine of all time. Daly left the Marines after World War I. He moved back to New York. This guy never married, never had kids. He spent the rest of his days working as a bank guard on Wall Street. Daly passed away in 1937 at the age of 63. But Daniel Daly was a true blue American badass with 2 Medals of Honor and "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" Absolutely unbelievable. More people should know about a guy like Daniel Daly. Thank God for guys like him. Okay, anyway, guys, I'll go ahead and wrap the show up for today. If you like the show, please go ahead and tell a friend about it. If you would, please follow us on Spotify. You can also follow us on Instagram at Foggy Dew Daily. If you'd like to ask the show a question, please go ahead and email the show at foggydew95@gmail.com. But in the meantime, I'd ask you to say a prayer, ask questions, and stay vigilant. This is the Foggy Dew signing off.